Close your eyes for a moment and step into a world that's hard to imagine today. Picture yourself as a 12-year-old boy named Elias, born in a distant province, perhaps from a Greek family in Asia Minor, or a Syrian village caught up in the chaos of war. It doesn't really matter exactly how it happened. Maybe your parents had no choice but to let you go because hunger was tearing the family apart, or perhaps Roman soldiers swept through your home and carried you off as part of the spoils. Either way, one day you're free, running through olive groves or helping with the goats, and the next you're stripped bare, standing on a rough wooden platform in the heart of Rome's bustling forum. The air is thick with dust and the shouts of merchants. A crude placard dangles from your neck, scribbled with details about your age, your origins, your smooth skin, your curly dark hair, your slender build. Crowds push past, but many stop to look. Rough hands reach out, potential buyers poking and prodding, turning you this way and that, treating you no differently than they would a horse or a cow at market. One man grabs your jaw, forces your mouth wide to inspect your teeth for signs of health. Another squeezes your arms and legs, checking for strength, while fingers comb through your curls, assessing their softness. You feel the heat rising in your cheeks, the burning shame of being exposed to everyone, desperate to cover yourself, to hide, but your hands are bound or held back. You think about bolting, running through the crowd into the streets, but where could you possibly go? You're in the center of the empire, surrounded by strangers who see you only as goods to be traded. You're not headed for the back, breaking toil in the mines, where men waste away in darkness, or the endless fields under the scorching sun, or even the blood-soaked sands of the arena to fight as a gladiator. No, your looks have sealed a different path. That curly hair, that fair complexion, those delicate features, they make you stand out. And in the shadowed corners of Roman society, that means something far more sinister. There's a particular kind of enslaved boy that the history books tend to gloss over or ignore entirely. The Romans had a name for them, cherished ones, or more precisely, delicati, young males chosen specifically for their beauty, purchased by the most powerful men in the empire's senators, governors, even emperors. What happened to these boys behind closed doors isn't the stuff of standard lessons about Roman glory. It's the ugly underbelly of a civilization that prided itself on law, engineering, and conquest. If these hidden truths about the past shock you, show your support by engaging with content like this, because we're about to dive deep into what it truly meant to be a beautiful young slave in the height of imperial Rome. The biggest slave markets in the city were clustered near the Tiber River, in places like the Forum Boarium. Day after day, ships and caravans brought in fresh arrivals, captives from distant wars, children handed over by desperate families in the provinces, debtors sold to settle accounts. Not every enslaved person fetched the same price. A strong adult meant for farm labor might go for a few thousand denarii, enough to buy a small plot of land. Those destined for the mines were even cheaper, seen as disposable tools that would burn out quickly in the deadly depths. But a boy like Elias, 12 years old, with those striking curls, pale skin, and refined looks, he could command over 10,000 denarii, sometimes more than the cost of an entire estate. Ancient writers noted it plainly. A beautiful young boy was worth far more than agricultural land. Why the premium? Because he wasn't bought for heavy work. He was acquired to adorn a wealthy household, to serve wine at lavish dinners, to entertain in private chambers, to be kept close in the bedrooms of the elite. The term, delicatus, sounded almost affectionate, meaning something precious, refined, exquisite. But the truth was far darker. Imagine a high-ranking senator strolling through the market, having dismissed dozens of older or scared individuals as unsuitable. Then he spots Elias, youthful, graceful, unmarred. The senator steps closer, examines every inch, orders the boy to turn around, to speak a few words in his native tongue. He turns to the traitor, as he prepared, trained in the ways a master might expect. The dealer nods knowingly. This one is fresh, untouched, straight from the provinces. The deal is struck for an astronomical sum, equivalent to years of a legionary's pay. In that moment, Elias's high price locks in his destiny a life of apparent luxury, but one without any hope of true freedom. Once inside the grand villa, Elias steps into a gilded cage. Being a delicatess didn't mean leisure or kindness, it meant total ownership. Every moment, every part of his body belonged to his master, and for many like him. The horrors went even further, deliberate mutilation to preserve that youthful appeal forever. In the Roman world, there was a class of enslaved individuals known as eunuchs, often called spadons. While official laws, like those under earlier emperors, claimed to prohibit castration within the empire, the reality for the powerful was different. Wealthy men ignored the rules, importing specialists or arranging procedures in secret. Why go to such lengths? Control, above all. A eunuch couldn't father children, couldn't form independent loyalties or a family line that might challenge his owner. He was property in the purest form. But there was another, more twisted motive. Castration before adulthood halted the changes of puberty. The voice stayed high and clear, the skin remained smooth, no beard grew, the body kept its slender, boyish shape indefinitely. That's exactly what many elite Romans craved in their delicati. Think about Elias, just a few days into his new life in the senator's sprawling home on the Palatine Hill. He struggles with the Latin commands, confused by the routines, the constant scrutiny. One morning, rough hands seize him, servants or guards drag him to a dimly lit room. He fights, screams for help, but doors slam shut and no one intervenes. What follows is unimaginable agony, a procedure that will alter him permanently. The methods were barbaric. One involved tying a tight cord around the base, starving the tissue of blood until it withered and dropped away, weeks of excruciating pain, with infection almost guaranteed. The other was quicker but no less horrific, a sharp blade to remove everything, followed by searing the wound with a glowing hot iron to stem the bleeding. No pain relief, no mercy. Survival rates were dismal. Many boys died from shock, blood loss, or fever within days. Those who lived emerged changed, voices forever light, faces beardless, bodies trapped in a perpetual state between child and man. Rome dressed this brutality in terms of sophistication and desire. Boys from regions like Cappadocia or Galatia were prized, because local experts there had refined the technique slightly, improving odds just enough to make them valuable imports. Historical accounts mention emperors who publicly condemned the practice while privately benefiting from it, raising taxes on existing eunuchs not to end it, but to profit more. Poets describe these altered boys with flowery words, voices like birdsong, skin like polished stone, beautiful phrases masking unspeakable cruelty. Rome loved to point fingers at Eastern kingdoms for their courts full of eunuchs, calling it decadent and unmanly. Yet the palaces in Rome itself were no different. The double standard ran deep, condemning abroad what they embraced at home. You might wonder if anyone today knows about this side of Roman slavery. Ask yourself, or share your thoughts, because the next part uncovers even more disturbing stories that rarely make it into mainstream history. One of the most infamous examples involves a young enslaved boy caught up in the whims of Emperor Marcus around 65 AD. The emperor became fixated on him because of an eerie resemblance to his late wife. In a fit of obsession, Marcus ordered the boy altered, completely castrated, then dressed in fine women's garments, adorned with jewels and cosmetics, hair styled like a noble lady. In a lavish public ritual, complete with guests and ceremony, the emperor married him, bestowing the wife's name and treating him as empress. Picture the spectacle. The ruler of the known world parading through Rome's streets with this transformed teenager on his arm, holding hands, exchanging kisses, insisting everyone address him by the dead wife's name. The court, Senators, generals, officials had no choice but to comply, pretending this was normal. The boy accompanied the emperor to games, banquets, official duties, seated as consort in the imperial box. This wasn't tenderness or partnership. It was raw power on display, the ability to take a person, remake their body, rewrite their identity, and force the entire empire to accept the new reality. Refusal meant death, for the boy at least. After Marcus's suicide in 68 AD, the boy was passed to the next ruler, then another, treated like an exotic possession, handed down like fine furniture. Sources hint he eventually chose suicide to escape the endless cycle of exploitation. A heartbreaking end to a life stolen twice over, but he wasn't unique. Literature from the era mentions many such cherished boys in elite homes. Poets wrote verses praising their grace, mourning early deaths as if losing a prized artifact. They lived in opulence, marble rooms, silk clothes, exquisite meals most Romans could only dream of.
Yet freedom, none.
Trained rigorously in arts, music, recitation, dance, to perform flawlessly, always poised, always available. A typical day might begin at dawn with the master's awakening, ending only when he retired, often late, after parties. In the dead of night, a summons could come fetch wine, entertain guests. At those gatherings, intoxicated men would leer, comment crudely on the boy's appearance, speculate openly about his uses. He stood silent, head bowed, trained not to react, reduced to ornament in a room of predators. The imperial court amplified these dangers. Proximity to power brought perks but immense risk. Rumors swirled around earlier emperors like Gaius Julius, whose island retreat was whispered to host unspeakable acts with very young delicati, boys trained for twisted games in pools or gardens. Trials sometimes exposed abuses, but not to protect the enslaved, only when elite interests clashed. The boys' words held no weight in court, they had no legal voice. That's the bitter irony, these delicati were everywhere visible, gliding through halls at feasts, adorned in gold, seen by thousands, yet utterly powerless. Luxury surrounded them, but chains were invisible. A single misstep, a glance too bold, a word misplaced, could mean whipping, demotion, sale, or worse. Rome boasted of its superiority over barbaric neighbors, mocking their eunuch-filled courts as signs of weakness. Yet Roman villas and palaces overflowed with the same. Laws existed on paper, but emperors and senators flouted them, importing or creating their own. A statesman might thunder in the forum about dignity, honor, Roman strength, then return home to indulge whatever whims struck with the boy waiting in his chambers. The same society preaching virtue enabled this exploitation. Every empire cloaks its shadows in grandeur. Rome's aqueducts, roads, and laws dazzle us still, but they rested on countless lives like Elias's, bought young, shaped to fit desires, denied humanity. Some today romanticize these favored positions, pointing to the comforts. But comfort without choice is still captivity. At the heart of power, wearing finery amid marble, they remained owned. Imagine a new scene. Elias, now settled in the household, wakes before sunrise to prepare the master's bath. Steam rises in the private caldarium, scented with oils from distant lands. He pours warm water, adjusts towels, stands ready for any command. The senator enters, still groggy from last night's wine, and casually pulls Elias close, not for conversation but use. Afterward, dismissed with a wave, Elias cleans up silently, biting back tears. Later, at a dinner party, he's positioned near the couch, refilling goblets as guests debate philosophy or politics, their eyes wandering over him, hands brushing, accidentally. One guest, emboldened by drink, jokes about borrowing him for the night. Laughter echoes. Elias freezes, knowing refusal isn't his to give. Another day training session with a tutor brought in to refine his manners. He learns to pour wine without spilling, to recite poetry in flawless Latin accent, to dance gracefully to flute music. Praise comes if perfect, correction swift and painful if not. Evenings might involve performing for visitors, singing, posing like a statue while they admire, or consider a festival, carried in a litter through crowded streets to a public event, dressed in translucent silks that draw stares and whispers. Seated beside the master in the theater, he feels the weight of hundreds of eyes, knowing his role is to enhance the owner's status. Years pass. Perhaps the master decides to preserve his appeal longer. Elias, now 15, is taken away one night. Held down again, the knife flashes. Agony follows, fever near death. He survives, altered forever. Voice unchanged, body softened further. The master is pleased. Guests comment on his enduring youthfulness. Contrast this with field slaves' brutal labor, yes, but camaraderie and shared misery. Dreams of manumission. For Delicati, isolation reigns, no peers, constant performance. Think of another boy, perhaps named Lysis, in a different villa. His master, a poet, composes verses about his beauty, reads them aloud at symposia. Lysis smiles on cue, but inside resentment builds. One day, a small act of defiance, a spilled cup, earns severe punishment, whipped in the courtyard, then sent to harsher duties as warning. Or imagine twins, rare prizes, bought together for a governor's household, displayed as matching ornaments used interchangeably. Their bond the only comfort in a world that sees them as toys. These aren't just hypotheticals. Echoes appear in surviving poems, letters, legal records. Boys mourned like lost pets, praised for compliance, traded when taste changed. Rome's fall wasn't invaders alone. A society tolerating such dehumanization sowed its own decay. Grandeur built on silenced suffering can endure. We admire Roman arches and oratory, but forget the cost in human dignity. Remembering boys like Elias isn't about guilt. It's about recognizing fragility of rights, how power corrupts when unchecked. Next time you see a Roman mosaic of a banquet or emperor's bust, look closer. Likely, Delicati linger in the background, beautiful, silent, suffering. If this reveals a Rome far from schoolbook ideals, share what disturbed you most. History's uncomfortable corners teach the most.